Racist man punches black girl, but Neymar rushes to save her. How will this story turn out? To find out, watch the video to the end. But first, please subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications to get more stories like this. The streets of Sao Paulo buzzed with life. People hurried along sidewalks, taxis honked impatiently, and the aroma of fresh pão de queijo wafted from nearby bakeries. Among the crowd was Camila, a 13-year-old girl with a passion for football that rivaled the pros. With her backpack slung over her shoulders, she clutched a small, well-worn football, a gift from her late mother. Camila had been counting down the days to this moment. Neymar was in town, making a special appearance at a youth football event at a local stadium. As one of the biggest stars in the world, seeing him in person was more than a dream. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Her father, Rafael, walked beside her, smiling at his daughter's enthusiasm. "Are you ready, Princessa?" "I'm more than ready, Dad," she grinned, tightening her grip on the ball. But as they crossed a busy intersection, the moment took a dark turn. A middle-aged man in a brown leather jacket and a baseball cap blocked their path. His face twisted with disdain as he looked at Camila. "You shouldn't be here," he spat, his tone dripping with contempt. Camila blinked in confusion. "What?" The man scoffed. "People like you, dirty, poor, always think they can take up space they don't deserve." Rafael stepped forward protectively. "Excuse me?" The man smirked. "I see you're kind all the time, begging for attention, pretending like you belong." Before Rafael could react, the man shoved Camila, making her stumble backward onto the pavement. Gasps erupted from passers-by. "Are you insane?" Rafael shouted, reaching for his daughter. Camila, stunned, struggled to stand. Her ball rolled a few feet away, stopping near the foot of a man in a black leather jacket and bleached blonde hair. The crowd murmured. It was Neymar. He had witnessed everything. And in that moment, something inside him ignited. Neymar bolted forward, intercepting the racist man just as he raised his fist again. This time, aiming directly at Camila. But the punch never landed. With lightning-fast reflexes, Neymar grabbed the man's wrist mid-swing. The entire street fell silent. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Neymar's voice was firm, his grip unyielding. The man froze, his arrogance faltering. He had just tried to attack a child, and now he was face-to-face with one of the most famous athletes in the world. The crowd watched in stunned silence. Camila, wide-eyed, stared up at her hero. Rafael clenched his fists, his protective instincts raging, but Neymar was already handling it. "You don't touch her," Neymar said, his voice low but full of authority. The man's confidence crumbled. He stammered, I didn't mean to what?" Neymar interrupted. "Hurt a kid? Attack someone just because of their skin color?" The crowd exploded with boos. Security guards, alerted by the commotion, rushed toward them. Neymar released the man's wrist just as two officers grabbed him, hauling him away. As the racist man was dragged off, the crowd erupted into cheers, celebrating justice in real time. Neymar turned toward Camila and knelt beside her. "You okay, Garota?" Tears welled in her eyes. You saved me." Neymar smiled warmly. "No one deserves to be treated like that, ever." Rafael placed a hand on Neymar's shoulder, his voice shaking. "Obrigado, Neymar." The football star shook his head. "No need to thank me. This shouldn't have happened in the first place." Neymar noticed the ball at his feet, the same one Camila had dropped. He picked it up and spun it effortlessly on his fingertips. "You like football?" he asked, grinning. Camila nodded eagerly. "Then let's go," Neymar said, offering her his hand. "Go where?" Camila asked, still in shock. Neymar pointed toward the stadium. "You're coming with me." The crowd roared in approval as Neymar led Camila toward the event. In just a few minutes, she had gone from being a girl shoved on the street to walking beside her idol, and she had no idea that her life was about to change forever. Camila could barely process what was happening. One moment, she was being humiliated on the street, and the next, Neymar himself was leading her toward the stadium like she was someone important. The crowd cheered as they walked, people pulling out their phones to capture the moment. Social media was already exploding with clips of Neymar defending her. And within minutes, her story would be all over the internet. Her father, Rafael, followed close behind, still in shock. "Neymar, are you sure about this?" he asked hesitantly. The football star glanced over his shoulder. "Claro, if she loves football, she deserves to be here." Camila felt her heart race as they approached the security gate. A few guards stepped forward, looking confused. This wasn't part of the planned event. "Ella está conmigo," Neymar said firmly, leaving no room for argument. The guards exchanged glances before quickly stepping aside. The stadium loomed ahead. From inside, the cheers of thousands of fans echoed through the corridors. Camila gulped. Was this real? As they walked through the tunnel, Neymar looked down at her ball, the one he had picked up earlier. It was old, the colors faded from years of use. "You play a lot, nah?" he asked, spinning the ball in his hands. "Every day," she whispered. Neymar smiled. "Then let's see what you got." Camila froze in place. "Me?" she squeaked. Neymar laughed. "Of course. What, you think I'd bring you all this way just to watch?" Before she could react, they stepped onto the field. The stadium erupted in cheers. Camila's breath hitched. Thousands of people were watching. The other players had paused their warm-ups. Eyes locked on the young girl Neymar had brought onto the pitch. She could hardly move. Neymar noticed her hesitation. He bent down, looking her in the eyes. "Hey, don't worry about them. Just focus on the ball. Show me what you can do." Camila swallowed her fear. She took a deep breath and nodded. Neymar tossed the ball to her feet. "All right, let's play." Neymar took a few steps back, watching as Camila positioned herself. The entire stadium was watching, waiting to see what would happen next. The other players on the field, some of the best in the world, stood still, their attention focused on the young girl who had just moments ago been attacked on the streets. Camila felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her, but she refused to let it crush her. She had dreamed of a moment like this her entire life. If she hesitated now, she might never get another chance. Taking a deep breath, she let her instincts take over. She started dribbling the ball, her movements quick and precise. The worn-out ball might not have been in the best condition, but her skills were undeniable. Neymar smiled as he watched her, impressed by her footwork. He decided to test her. Moving forward, he challenged her with light pressure, trying to steal the ball. Camila reacted immediately, shifting her weight and cutting to the side with speed. The crowd gasped as she maneuvered past Neymar, keeping control of the ball like a true professional. The energy in the stadium shifted. What had started as a heartwarming moment was quickly turning into something else. Camila wasn't just a scared girl Neymar had defended. She was a player. She was talented, and she belonged on that field. Neymar signaled to a few of his teammates, inviting them to join in. They obliged, forming a small circle around Camila. She looked up, realizing she was surrounded by world-class footballers. Instead of panicking, she grinned. This was her dream, and she wasn't about to let fear hold her back. One by one, they challenged her, and one by one, she outmaneuvered them. She had been playing football since she could walk, training every single day on the cracked streets of her neighborhood. Her skills had been honed through perseverance, not privilege. And now, all of that hard work was paying off in the most unimaginable way. The crowd began chanting her name. Camila, Camila, felt surreal. Just minutes ago, she had been pushed aside, told she didn't belong. Now, an entire stadium was celebrating her. Neymar finally called for a pause, clapping his hands as he approached her. "Incrível," he said, shaking his head in amazement. "Você joga como coração." Camila beamed, her chest rising and falling with deep breaths. She had given everything she had in those few minutes, and it had been worth it. Neymar then turned to the coaching staff on the sidelines. "We need to do something for her," he said. One of the officials, a serious-looking man with a headset, nodded. "I think we already are," he replied with a knowing smile. Moments later, one of the team coaches approached Camila, bending down slightly to meet her at eye level. "How would you like to be our honorary guest for the rest of the match?" he asked. Camila's eyes widened. "Me?" The coach chuckled. "Yes, you. You'll sit with the team, experience everything up close. And if Neymar needs a backup, maybe you can step in," he joked. The stadium erupted into laughter and cheers. Camila turned to her father, who had been watching everything from the sidelines, his eyes full of emotion. He nodded. "Vai, princessa," he said softly. "This is your moment." Camila could hardly contain her excitement as she followed Neymar and the team to the bench. A staff member handed her an official team jacket, which was far too big for her, but she wore it with pride. Sitting among some of the greatest players in the world, she felt like she was floating. Meanwhile, the man who had attacked her was being escorted out of the stadium by security. His face was red with shame as the crowd booed him mercilessly. Reporters swarmed the area, eager to capture the disgrace of a man who had dared to harm a child. Social media exploded with footage of the incident, and within minutes, the man's face was everywhere, condemned by people across the globe. As the match resumed, Camila sat in awe, watching as Neymar and his teammates moved with grace and power. Every time Neymar had the ball, the stadium erupted, and Camila cheered louder than anyone. She felt connected to him in a way she had never felt with any other player. He wasn't just a football star, he was her hero. As the game continued, Camila's mind drifted back to what had happened earlier. The man who had attacked her, what had driven him to such hatred. She knew there were people like him in the world, people who judged others by their skin color or background, but she had never imagined she would experience it so directly. Her fingers tightened around the sleeves of the oversized team jacket. Neymar had stood up for her. He had shown the world that people like that man wouldn't win. And for the first time, she realized something important. She wasn't just a victim of racism. She was a fighter. When the final whistle blew, the stadium erupted into cheers. Neymar's team had won, and the players ran onto the field to celebrate. But amidst the excitement, something else was happening. Reporters had gathered along the sidelines, and they were all looking at Camila. Neymar approached her again, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Come with me," he said, offering his hand. Camila hesitated for only a second before taking it. He led her toward the reporters, and as they saw her coming, the cameras started flashing wildly. A journalist with a microphone stepped forward. "Neymar, what made you stop the game earlier to defend this young girl?" Neymar glanced down at Camila, then back at the cameras. "Because she deserved to be defended," he said simply. "No one should be treated that way." Another reporter spoke up. "Do you think this incident will change anything?" Neymar nodded. "I hope so. The world needs to see that we won't stand for racism or hatred. Camila is strong. She proved that today." Camila looked up at him, her heart swelling. He was speaking about her as if she were someone important, someone who mattered. And for the first time in her life, she truly felt like she did. A reporter turned to her. "Camila, how do you feel about everything that happened today?" Camila hesitated. She had never spoken to so many people at once, let alone been on live television. But she took a deep breath and spoke from her heart. "I was scared at first," she admitted. "But then Neymar stood up for me and the crowd stood up for me. And I realized that there are more good people than bad people in the world." The crowd behind her cheered at her words. One last reporter asked, "What do you want to say to other kids who might face situations like this?" Camila thought about it for a moment. Then she looked straight into the camera and said, "Don't let anyone tell you that you don't belong. You do. And if someone tries to bring you down, remember that there are people who will lift you up." Neymar smiled down at her. "Well said." The interview ended, and as they walked off the field together, Camila felt like she had won something much bigger than a football match. She had won confidence. She had won hope. She had won a new future. As Camila walked off the field, she could feel the energy of the crowd still buzzing behind her. People were chanting her name, waving, and smiling as if she were a superstar. She had never felt so seen before. It was overwhelming, but in the best way possible. Neymar stayed by her side as they made their way toward the tunnel. "How are you feeling?" he asked. Camila took a deep breath. Like I just lived a dream. Neymar chuckled. Good, because you're just getting started. As they reached the exit, Camila saw her father standing nearby, waiting for her. The moment she saw him, she ran into his arms. Rafael held her tightly, closing his eyes for a moment. You did amazing, baby girl, he whispered. Camila pulled back, her eyes wide with excitement. Neymar gave me his jacket, and I got to sit with the team, and the whole stadium cheered for me. The words tumbled out of her mouth in a rush. Rafael laughed. I saw Princessa. I saw it all. Neymar smiled at their bond. He extended his hand to Rafael. She's incredible. You should be very proud. That night, Camila lay in bed, her body sore from excitement but her mind still buzzing. She stared at the ceiling, replaying the events of the day over and over. The way the crowd had chanted her name, the way Neymar had stood up for her, the way she had dribbled past some of the best players in the world. It all felt like a dream she never wanted to wake up from. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She reached for it, expecting messages from friends who had seen her on TV. Instead, her heart sank as she read the words on the screen. You don't belong here. Stay out of our club. Before she could process it, another message popped up. You got in because of pity, not skill. You don't deserve this. Camila sat up, her fingers tightening around the phone. She had thought everything was behind her, that the nightmare of being treated unfairly was over. But here it was again, just in a different form. She hesitated before locking her phone and placing it face down. She wasn't going to let this ruin what she had worked so hard for. She had faced worse, and she wasn't going to back down now. The next morning, she didn't tell Rafael about the messages. He had already worried enough about her, and she didn't want to add to it. Instead, she put on her training gear and headed to the field as if nothing had happened. But when she arrived, she noticed a shift in the atmosphere. A few players were whispering, shooting her glances. She knew immediately whoever had sent those messages wasn't alone. She took a deep breath and walked onto the field, keeping her chin up. She wasn't going to give them the reaction they wanted. As practice began, she focused on her movements, blocking out the murmurs and occasional snide comments. But it wasn't until one of the boys purposely tripped her during a drill that she realized just how serious this was. She hit the ground hard, the breath knocked out of her. A few of the players snickered. The coach blew his whistle, his eyes narrowing. What the hell was that? The boy shrugged. Accident. Camila pushed herself up, brushing dirt off her hands. She could feel the heat rising in her cheeks, the anger bubbling inside, but she refused to let them see her break. The coach glared at the boy but didn't press the issue further. All right, back in position. We're running the drill again. Camila nodded, getting back in line. She wasn't going to let them win. For the rest of practice, she played harder than ever. Every pass was sharper, every sprint faster. She didn't let the whispers get to her. She didn't react when someone muttered under their breath as she passed. She just kept pushing, proving with every movement that she belonged. By the end of the session, she was exhausted but satisfied. As she walked toward the locker rooms, one of the girls who had been silent the whole time finally spoke up. You played really well today. Camila turned, surprised. Thanks. The girl hesitated, glancing around before lowering her voice. Not everyone feels the way they do. Some of us are actually happy you're here. Camila felt a lump in her throat. Really? The girl nodded. Yeah. And you should know, Neymar standing up for you? That was huge. Some of them are just jealous. Camila exhaled, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders. Thanks for telling me that. The girl gave her a small smile before jogging off. Camila watched her go, then squared her shoulders. She wasn't going anywhere. That night, Camila sat in her room, staring at the messages on her phone. She had ignored them during the day, choosing to focus on her training. But now, in the quiet of her room, they felt heavier. She wondered if the people sending them had always harbored this kind of resentment or if it had only surfaced because Neymar had defended her. She thought about deleting them, but something inside her stopped her. No, she wouldn't erase them. Not yet. These words, these cruel attempts to break her, were proof of something bigger. They were proof that she was doing something right. Otherwise, no one would have felt threatened enough to try and push her away. With a deep breath, she set her phone aside and went to bed, determined not to let fear dictate her future. The next morning, as she walked onto the training field, she felt a shift in the energy around her. The same players who had whispered behind her back were watching her more closely now. She wasn't sure if they were waiting for her to crumble or if they were starting to see that she wouldn't. Either way, she wasn't going to let them dictate how she carried herself. Today's practice was more intense. The coach had them running drills for nearly an hour before switching to a full scrimmage. Camila found herself on the same team as the boy who had tripped her the day before. He didn't pass to her once. No matter how open she was, no matter how well positioned, he ignored her. At first, she felt the familiar sting of rejection, but then something clicked. If he wasn't going to include her, she'd make him regret it. The next time the opposing team stole the ball from him, Camila was already moving before he could react. She cut in front of the attacker, intercepting the ball with perfect precision, and sprinted down the field. She could hear the gasps, the shouts from the sidelines. She didn't stop. 2 defenders came at her, but she maneuvered between them effortlessly, her footwork sharp and controlled. She felt free, like the weight of everything outside the field had disappeared. As she reached the goal, she saw an opening and took the shot. The ball soared past the keeper and hit the back of the net. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the sound of applause broke through. Not everyone was clapping. She could still see a few players scowling. But it didn't matter, because at that moment, she had proven something, not just to them, but to herself. She belonged here. As practice ended, the coach pulled her aside. "You played like you had something to prove today," he said. She nodded, still catching her breath. "I did." He studied her for a moment. "And you did prove it. Keep playing like that, and you'll have a future in this sport." Camila felt something inside her shift. Hope. Real, tangible hope. As she left the field, one of the boys who had been silent before walked up to her. "That was a sick goal," he admitted, almost grudgingly. Camila smiled. "Thanks." And just like that, she knew she was turning the tide. She wasn't just the girl Neymar had defended anymore. She was Camila, a footballer, a fighter, and she wasn't backing down. That evening, Camila sat in the living room with Rafael, her fingers idly tracing the stitching on Neymar's jersey. He had framed it for her, setting it on the shelf beside the television as a reminder of everything she had endured and overcome. The past few days had been overwhelming, but in the best way. She had fought through rejection, doubt, and discrimination, but she had never let it break her. Rafael glanced at her from the kitchen, noticing her lost in thought. "Penny for your thoughts?" Camila looked up, smiling slightly. "Just thinking about everything. How things changed so fast." He leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. "And how are you feeling about it now?" She exhaled. "Stronger." Rafael nodded approvingly. "Good, because that's exactly what you are." The next morning, Camila arrived at the training facility earlier than usual. She had made a promise to herself. She wasn't going to be just another player on the team. She was going to be one of the best. She was already at a disadvantage in the eyes of some of the others, so the only way forward was to prove herself beyond any doubt. She was on the field before the coaches had even arrived, practicing her dribbles, her sprints, her shooting. The sun was barely rising, the air crisp, but she didn't care. Every movement, every step, every kick had to be perfect. By the time the rest of the team arrived, she was already drenched in sweat. The other players watched her as they stepped onto the field, some with curiosity, others with mild annoyance. One of the boys, the same one who had tripped her earlier, scoffed. "Trying too hard, aren't you?" Camila didn't even look at him. "If you're not trying hard, what are you doing here?" A few players chuckled at her response, and the boy scowled but said nothing. As training began, she noticed the shift. The resistance was still there, but it was cracking. Some of the teammates who had ignored her before had started passing to her in scrimmages. The coach had begun calling on her more often. The same boy who had mocked her earlier even begrudgingly nodded after she pulled off a slick move past him. By the end of the session, she was exhausted but satisfied. As she walked off the field, she felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to see the assistant coach. "You work hard," he said simply. Camila nodded. "It's the only way to get better." He smiled. "Keep it up. You're going to go far." As she showered and changed, her phone buzzed. She braced herself before checking the screen, expecting another cruel message. But this time it was different. "Respect. You're proving yourself out there." She stared at the message for a moment, unsure how to feel. Was it from one of the teammates who had doubted her? Maybe. Either way, it meant something. That evening, Raphael took her out for a small celebration. Nothing fancy, just their favorite local diner where they used to go after her early football games as a child. As they ate, he watched her closely. "You're different," he said suddenly. Camila raised an eyebrow. "In what way?" "You carry yourself differently now. You know you belong." She thought about that for a moment. He was right. She had spent so much of her life feeling like she had to prove herself, like she had to fight to be seen. And she still did, but now, she didn't feel like she was fighting alone. The next day at training, Neymar showed up. The team was in the middle of warm-ups when he walked onto the field. And within seconds, everyone's attention was on him. The coach called for a break, and Neymar made his way toward Camila with a smile. "Look at you," he said. "How's it been?" Camila grinned, wiping sweat from her forehead. "Tough, but worth it." He nodded. "Good. That's the way it should be." The other players were watching, trying to act casual but failing miserably. Neymar noticed and smirked. "What? You guys don't want to play?" The team scrambled into action, eager to have a chance to train with the superstar. For the next hour, Neymar played alongside them, giving tips, offering advice, and most of all, making sure Camila knew he was watching. At the end of the session, he pulled her aside. "You're doing great," he said. Camila exhaled. "Still some people who don't think I belong." Neymar tilted his head. "So prove them wrong. Every single day. Make it so clear that they have no choice but to respect you." She nodded, taking his words to heart. Before leaving, Neymar called for everyone's attention. "All right, listen up," he said. "Camila's here for a reason. She's earned this, and I expect to see all of you treating her as an equal, because she's proving she belongs." There was silence for a moment. Then, slowly, one by one, the players nodded. As Neymar walked away, Camila felt something shift. It wasn't just about proving herself anymore. It was about something bigger. That night, as she lay in bed, she smiled. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for every kid who had ever been told they didn't belong. And she wasn't going to stop. The days turned into weeks, and Camila continued to push herself harder than ever. Every training session was a battle, but she was winning. The murmurs of doubt that had once surrounded her began to fade, replaced by quiet respect. Some of her teammates still weren't fully on her side, but it no longer mattered. She wasn't playing for their approval. She was playing for herself, for her future, for every moment she had dreamed of stepping onto a professional pitch. One evening after practice, Raphael met her at the field. He watched as she finished a set of sprints, her face determined, her breathing heavy. "You don't stop, do you?" he said, shaking his head with a smile. Camila grinned. "Not until I get where I'm going." He handed her a bottle of water. "Well, you might want to take a break and check your phone." She frowned, pulling it out of her bag. Dozens of notifications filled the screen, messages, missed calls, alerts from social media. Confused, she opened one of them, and then her heart nearly stopped. Neymar had posted about her. A video clip from their last training session played on his account, showing Camila skillfully dodging defenders and scoring a goal. The caption read, "Remember her name. She's going to change the game." Her hands trembled as she scrolled through the comments. Thousands of people from around the world reacting, supporting her, cheering her on. Raphael chuckled, watching her expression. "Guess you're famous now." Camila was speechless. She had always wanted to be recognized for her talent, but she never imagined something like this. That night, she barely slept. Messages from journalists, football scouts, and even players she admired kept pouring in. Some were invitations to trials, others were just words of encouragement. But the one that stood out the most was a personal message from Neymar himself. "Keep going. This is just the beginning." The next morning, she arrived at training to a different atmosphere. The tension that had once surrounded her was gone. Players who had ignored her before now greeted her with nods. The boy who had tripped her during her first week finally passed her the ball without hesitation. During the scrimmage, she played with a confidence she had never felt before. Every touch was precise, every move calculated. She wasn't just proving herself anymore. She was leading. After practice, the head coach called her over. "You've got scouts coming next week," he said. "Big ones." Her breath caught. "For real?" He nodded. "You've been making waves. Keep playing like this and you won't just be training with us. You'll be playing at the highest level." As she walked off the field, the weight of it all settled in. She had fought, she had endured, and now she was on the brink of something huge. That evening, she stood outside under the stars, holding Neymar's jersey in her hands. It wasn't just a gift anymore. It was a symbol of everything she had survived, of every battle she had won. She took a deep breath, feeling the night air on her skin. This was just the beginning, and she was ready for whatever came next.